بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we continue today with the Treaty of Hudeybiye part 2, and in the last halaqah, in the last seerah, we had discussed the beginnings of the treaty of, or the incident of Hudeybiye. We talked about why it's called Hudeybiye, why some of the Sahaba called it a ghazwa, how the Prophet ﷺ entered into the area, he bypassed the troops of Khalid ibn al-Walid, and that the Prophet ﷺ, Allah Azza wa Jal caused the Prophet ﷺ's camel to camp at that plain that is called the plain of Hudeybiye. Now, so we stopped basically when the Prophet ﷺ camped. He realized Allah wanted him to stop here, so they set up their camp. Now, during the course of the next few days, many things happen. And the problem, which is one of the standard problems of the whole seerah, is that we have tidbits of various specific incidents, and the problem comes, how do you piece it together? How do you get, we have A, B, C, D. How do we know it's A, B, C, D or A, C, B or D, A, B? You see what I'm saying? We have lots of small narrations, and this is the standard problem of the entire seerah. And this is demonstrated usually in these types of incidents, like Uhud, for example, is one of the most complex. We have at least 100 narrations about specific things that happen at Uhud. How can we piece it all together? Same thing goes at Hudeybiye. We have one Sahabi giving us one incident, another Sahabi giving another incident. So to piece it chronologically is the big question. You guys, when you read the books written by modern scholars, you think this is all a beautiful narrative. When you go back to the classical sources, that's where the unraveling occurs, right? And one of the jobs of modern scholars is to piece it together in digestible formats. And so at a basic level, we just follow any modern scholar. But when you want to go advanced, this is the big issue that comes. So I will present to you a narrative or a version that Allah knows best. There's no way to know which is the exact correct chronology, but I'm just warning you, if you read some of the books, you will find bits and pieces here and there, and that is because the chronology is something we have to piece together. So, one of the things that happened, and I'll begin with this, even though we don't know exactly when it happened, was that the Quraysh tried to surprise attack the Muslims in Hudeybiye. The Quraysh tried to surprise attack the Muslims who were camped in Hudeybiye. When did this happen? The first day, the second day, the third day? Nothing is mentioned. We have no idea. It might have happened right at the very end. It might have happened right at the very beginning. But we just mentioned this separately because this is a one incident. Then the rest of the today will be all about emissaries back and forth. So we're going to be a continuous narrative of the emissaries. The Prophet sending one, the Quraysh sending another, the Prophet sending another, the Quraysh sending another. So we'll begin that after this one incident. So we said the Quraysh launched a surprise attack, and this hadith is recorded in Sahih Muslim, that we learn that 80 people of the Quraysh, they launched a surprise attack from the valley, or sorry, from the mountain area of Tan'im. Tan'im is where we call Masjid Aisha in our times, and so the Tan'im is neighboring Hudeybiye, and so they launched a surprise attack from Tan'im, and there were 80 armed men, and they launched, or they surprise attacked the Muslims in the early mornings, right before or around Salat al-Fajr, hoping to catch them by surprise. However, the Muslims were well prepared, and the Muslims, they had scouts and envoys, so they saw them coming, and so instead of surprise attacking the Muslims actually surrounded them and forced them to surrender without causing any bloodshed, which is an amazing miracle, without killing one of them. They forced them all to surrender. They dragged them, or they brought them to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ forgave all of them and commanded them to return back to Mecca. And this is an amazing twist, if you like, an amazing story here before the beginnings of the negotiation that clearly demonstrate, what does it demonstrate? Peace, exactly. It demonstrates that the Prophet ﷺ has no interest in bloodshed, that he has the full right in every legal system you can imagine. He has been surprise attacked, right? Every single legal system in the world will say you have the right to defend, to kill anybody who's attacking you. And if the whole 80 people had been decimated, every legal system in the world would have said he is fully justified. Right? Yet what happens? Not a single drop of blood is shed, and they are returned safely to Mecca. They're commanded to go back where they came from, and Allah mentions this in the Quran as a blessing that He has given. Surah Al-Fatah, verse 24. And by the way, all of Surah Al-Fatah is a reference to Hudeybiye. All of Fatah. A lot of average Muslims who haven't studied, lay Muslims, they assume Surah Al-Fatah has to do with the conquest of Mecca. Because Fatah is Fatah. And Fatah usually means the conquest. But this is a big mistake. Fatah means any conquest. And no doubt when you say the Fatah, you mean the conquest of Mecca. No doubt. But Surah Al-Fatah has nothing to do with the conquest of Mecca. Surah Al-Fatah in its entirety was revealed right after Hudaybiya, when the Prophet is returning back to Medina, as we'll talk about when we get there, right? So, Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina, this is Hudaybiya, not Mecca, not the conquest of Mecca. And in Surah Al-Fatah, verse 24, وهو الذي كف أيديهم عنكم وأيديكم عنهم بباطن مكة من بعد أن أظفركم عليهم. And He is the one who stopped their hands from reaching you and your hands from reaching them in the valleys of Mecca, even after you had victory over them. Notice here, He is the one who stopped their hands from reaching you. They could have had a huge impact. 80 people, fully armed, surprise attack on a sleeping camp. And then they were just planning to attack and run back away. So hundreds would have died. Out of the 1400, easily 200, 300 decimated, and then the 80 flee back. Allah says, هُوَ الَّذِي كَفَّ أَيْدِيَهُمْ عَنْكُمْ. He protected their hands from you. And then Allah says something amazing. And He also protected your hands from them. Because you might have wanted to kill them. But if you had killed them, the whole peace process, the whole negotiations would have come to a standstill. Obviously, if the Prophet had killed even one of them, he would have been justified. But could there have been a Hudaybiya then? And Hudaybiya, as we will see, was the biggest victory that Allah gave to the Muslims after the conquest of Mecca. Basically, the biggest victory is the conquest of Mecca, and then Hudaybiya. What happened after Hudaybiya is clearly a victory. If one drop of blood has been shed, there would not have been any Hudaybiya. So Allah is saying, this is my blessing. I stopped their hands, I stopped your hands, even after you captured them. مِن بَعْدِ أَنْ أَظْفَرَكُمْ عَلَيْهِمْ. Even after you had captured them. So this shows us that the Prophet ﷺ, his intentions were not for war, his intentions were completely for peace. Now, for the rest of today's seerah, we'll talk about the emissaries, the negotiation, back and forth. And again, so many scholars have attempted to reconstruct who went first, who went second, because really in the end of the day, we don't know. And what I'm going to present is but one alternative, one theory, and wallahi, if somebody presents another, it has, this is something that, this is my ijtihad, Allah knows best, and there are other scholars, if they look to the seerah, they'll find other sources as well. So, the first person who appears to have become an emissary is neither Qurashi nor Muslim, neither Makki nor Muhajir or Ansar. And he is a third party from the tribe of Khuza'a. And Khuza'a was one of the major tribes around Mecca. And Khuza'a was generally sympathetic to Islam, generally sympathetic to the Prophet ﷺ, but at this point in time they hadn't embraced Islam. And one of the leaders of Khuza'a by the name of Budayl ibn Warqa, Budayl ibn al-Warqa. Budayl ibn al-Warqa, one of the leaders of Khuza'a, it appears to be, and again the stories are very sketchy, the details are very sketchy, it appears to be he volunteered to be an emissary. A third party, a neutral party, nobody is going to doubt him. He's neither on this side nor on that side, but he is physically, geographically in the vicinity. He lives in that area, and also he does not want bloodshed. And he is a noble Arab. He does not want any civil war. And so he and Budayl ibn Warqa eventually accepts Islam. So we know that deep down inside his sympathies are for the Prophet ﷺ. Eventually he accepts Islam. Right now he's not a Muslim. So Budayl goes to the Prophet ﷺ as the leader of Khuza'a. He is the leader, the tribal leader of Khuza'a, and he offers him help. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Muhammad, because he's not Muslim yet. Ya Muhammad, I have just come from the other side of Hudaybiya, and I have left the sons of Ka'b ibn Lu'ay and Amir ibn Lu'ay on the other side, armed to the teeth. Now, who is Ka'b and Amir ibn Lu'ay? These are the great, great, great ancestors of the Quraysh. This is how they're talking about the other tribe. That the sons of that great legendary warrior, their sons are camped over there, meaning the Quraysh of Mecca. Right? I have left Ka'b and Amir ibn Lu'ay on the other side of the water of Hudeybiye, and they have a group of armed men, and they're waiting to fight you and prevent you from entering the haram. Meaning, Ya Muhammad, calm down, don't have anything hasty, don't cause any bloodshed. There's an army on the other side. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ responded, we have not come to fight. Rather, we have come to show honor to the house of Allah, meaning to perform umrah. And then he says the same phrase that he said this, I mentioned this last week, that he said this to the Muslims. He now says it to Budayl. He will say it to Suhail ibn Amr. He will say to every single emissary, the same paragraph, that indeed war has damaged the Quraysh and they have been hurt by it. And if they wish, then we can negotiate and be peaceful. And if they wish, then I will show them what we are made of, and my neck will be chopped off from, or my neck will be chopped off, my head will be chopped off from my neck until Allah decides the matter. Meaning, it's up to them. They want peace, they want war. I prefer peace. But if they want war, I'm willing to give them war. And then he said, and if they want, I can give them some time so that they can think about this and leave the city for us. Meaning, if they're awkward, they're seeing us here, I can give them the option of abandoning Mecca. Give them some time, then they can leave Mecca, we can go in, perform the Umrah, and then leave. Now, this suggestion, the Quraysh eventually took it, but they had the condition. What was the condition? Next year, right? Not this year, next year. So the Prophet ﷺ had this idea, which eventually the Quraysh agreed to. That look, if it's awkward, I understand, let them, anytime they want, give them a few days, we're waiting here, tell them to leave Mecca, and I will enter, and we will do the Umrah, then we will leave, and they can come back to Mecca. But if they stop or if they refuse, then I swear by the one in whose hands is my soul, I will fight them upon this matter until, and there's an expression in Arabic, until my neck is cut off and Allah's decree be done. There's an expression in Arabic that I will do this until I die, until my neck is cut off, until Allah's decree will be done. So Budayl said, I will go and inform them of your request or your position, because as of yet the Quraysh have not officially been told why the Prophet ﷺ has come to Mecca. So Budayl goes to the Quraysh and he says, I have spoken to this man and I have heard him say something. If you wish, I can repeat it for you. Because Budayl has not been chosen by the Quraysh to be an emissary. Budayl is volunteering. So he says, look, I just visited this man Muhammad ﷺ. If you want to hear what he has to say, allow me permission. Ibn Ishaq says, the foolish amongst them said, we have no reason to listen to you. You have nothing new to tell us. Why should we listen to you? We know exactly why he's here. Right? The Sufaha amongst them said this, that you're not going to give us any information we don't already know. But Ibn Ishaq says, the ones of intelligence said, let him speak. Let him say what he has to say. And so he informed them of the Prophet ﷺ's intentions. I've come in peace, not in war. And war has been lose-lose for the both of us. We've been fighting for too long. War has tired you out. It's tired us out. Let's just be in peace. Let me go visit the Kaaba. And if you want to leave, you can leave. And I will then come whenever you guys are ready. And then I'll go back to Medina. But if you refuse, then I will fight you until the death. And Allah Azza wa Jal's decree will be done. So he informed them of what the Prophet ﷺ said. Now notice over here that it is always the ignorant, the closed-minded. They don't even want to hear what the other party has to say. Right? It's nothing new. In our times we have the descendants of those ignorance. They're called Islamophobes. Right? They literally want to shut their ears. Doesn't matter what you have to say. They've already made up their minds about Islam and the Muslims. It doesn't matter how reasonable, no. Literally the Sufaha al-Qawm, the foolish amongst them, they want war, or they want bloodshed, or they want violence. And it is the people of intelligence that are open-minded, the people of intelligence that are wise, that control their emotions and listen to the other side. And also, really this shows us the evils of arrogance, that the foolish amongst them don't even care what is the reason of the Prophet. We are not going to even listen. And arrogance is so foolish, it blinds even your intellect. And we see this in the case of Iblis, the number one person who was arrogant in the history of humanity, that his arrogance was so blinded, he refused to listen to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His arrogance got the better of everything. So this shows us that eventually Budayl was allowed to speak, and so Budayl summarized for them the message of the Prophet ﷺ, and then he gave his own advice. He said, "O Quraysh, you are being hasty with this man. Your anger is getting the better of you. He has not come to fight. He has come to visit this house, honoring its sanctity." So Budayl, who is a neutral person from Khuza'a, and eventually he embraces Islam. Right now he's not a Muslim. The seeds of doubt are being sown amongst the other camp. And Budayl is the first person, and there will be many more who come and side with the Prophet ﷺ, that you guys are being hasty here. The Quraysh responded, "By Allah, we will never allow him to enter Mecca, and the Arabs will say that he had the better hand over us." And this, the Quraysh stuck with to the very end. When this thought came in, khalas, this is the first time it's being verbalized. Now for the rest of at least a week must have gone by. That's it, they've made up their minds. We will never allow him to come into Mecca. Why? What's the reason? So that the Arabs don't say that he managed to have the upper hand. It's all a matter of pride and izzah. It's all a matter of honor. That my honor will be wounded, my pride will be harmed if the Arabs hear that the Prophet ﷺ entered Mecca and we weren't able to stop him. And in the end they got this condition because they insisted. And the condition of the Prophet ﷺ, obviously that was also gotten, so the two of them compromised, as we will all know to come next year, but I'm jumping the gun over here. So the matter of Budayl ended. That Budayl tried, and the Quraysh really did not budge on this issue, and there's no negotiations done. And therefore, what began after this is another series of back and forths. But this time, the emissaries will come directly from either the Muslim side or the Qurashi side. Budayl is from neither. He's a neutral person. It appears his was the first time somebody attempted to bridge this gap. Now what's going to happen is a series of back and forths. And it appears that the first person to volunteer to go from the Quraysh side was Urwa ibn Mas'ud. And Urwa ibn Mas'ud was from the tribe of Thaqif. He was a Thaqafi. Urwa ibn Mas'ud, a Thaqafi. And Thaqif is based in which city? Ta'if. Thaqif is based in the city of Ta'if. And the city of Ta'if, as you know, is the sister city of Mecca. Mecca and Ta'if are at... there's a little bit of a tension, but there's also some camaraderie, and there's jealousy, meaning they're competing, but there's also some camaraderie. There's a bit of a tension between the two. And so Urwa ibn Mas'ud is one of the leaders of the city of Ta'if, from the tribe of Thaqif, and he is also now in Mecca figuring out what to do, because this is a matter of communal pride. So Urwa stands up and he says, "Am I not a father to you? Am I not a son to you?" This is the way the Arabs speak, meaning, am I not really a part of your tribe? Just because I'm from Thaqif, don't you know my loyalties lie with you, Quraysh, right? And it is also said that his mother was from the Quraysh, so he's literally saying that I am also of your blood. And so Urwa, the reason he's beginning this way, he needs the approval of the Quraysh to be an official emissary. So he begins by saying, "Am I not a father? Am I not a son to you? Do you accuse me of being unjust?" And they keep on saying, "No, we know who you are." And then he mentions many things that he's done in the past. "Did I not in such an occasion help you here? Did I not cause some bloodshed to be averted? Did I not cause reconciliation?" So he mentions his blessings, his resume, right? He's presenting his resume to the Quraysh, so to make them realize, look, I am somebody who's going to look after your interests, even if I'm not a Qurashi, I'm Thaqafi, but perhaps I can reason with this man. And so to all of the above, they praised him, they said, yes you are, until finally he said, okay, so Budayl has come to us with some news, some plan, some idea. Let me go back to him, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, and see what I can negotiate. Okay, so Urwa ibn Mas'ud, then he becomes the first real emissary that the Quraysh sends, even though he's not Qurashi. He's Thaqafi. He becomes the first emissary that once the news comes that the Prophet wants peace and not war. So Urwa says, okay, look, let me go and negotiate. Let's see what we can do. And so Urwa goes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells him the exact same thing that he says to Budayl. We have come in peace, and the same paragraph, right? That hasn't war become tiresome for the Quraysh? Haven't we both suffered from the war? Why don't the Quraysh let us be? We are just like the people. We want to go and do Umrah and Tawaf and then go, right? And if they wish, I can give them the same conditions. So the Prophet already has a plan, and it's a very reasonable plan. He's appealing to the emotions of the Quraysh. Why the bloodshed? Enough is enough now. I'm just coming for peace. You can see there's no war going on here. Let me go like all of the other people, and if you feel awkward, then we give you a time, you leave the city, we'll come, and then we'll leave, and that's it, end of story. So the same plan is given to Urwa. Urwa then comes back to the Prophet ﷺ and says, what is really the matter with you? What is all of this that you're causing tension between your people and you? You say you call to Allah, but then you come with a group of people, we don't know who they are. Meaning, the Ansar. Who are these people? These are not Thaqif or Quraysh. You come with a whole group, we don't know who they are. And you break the ties of kinship. We are one group. We are Quraysh and Thaqif, we're next to each other. Now you bring in the Aus and the Khazraj, and there were other Muslims as well by this time from the smaller tribes, right? We don't know who these people are. You come and you break the ties of kinship, and you break the sanctity of the haram, and you intend to spill blood. And it's as if he didn't hear anything the Prophet ﷺ said. He already has something in his mind. So the Prophet ﷺ refutes all of these points, and he says, I have only come to fulfill the ties of kinship, not to break them. And I have come to change the religion of my people to a better religion. I want them to be better, and I have come to make their lives a better life. Now, it's very interesting over here. Look at what he's smearing the Prophet ﷺ with. Breaking the ties of kinship, coming forth with a weird theology, new theology, and bringing a group of strangers. Who are these people and why are you coming to them? And also breaking the haram sanctity because you have come to us, meaning as if you're coming for war. And what we find in all of these smears is that there is a kernel of truth that has been layered with layers of lies. After all, from their perspective, they could say he's breaking the ties of kinship. Because from their paradigm, what's going on? The Prophet is breaking something new, right? So they say, you're breaking the ties of kinship. From their perspective, his religion is the strange religion. From their perspective, he's coming to Mecca with 1,400 people. And why am I saying this? Because every single smear against Islam, against the Prophet, against us as Muslims, deep down inside somewhere, there is perverted truth. There's a mixture of truth and a lot of falsehood. And had it not been for that kernel of truth, nobody would ever believe it. It is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that mankind that have in bad intention, they will take this kernel of truth and coat it with a coat of untruth and lies. And it's because of that kernel of truth that even the worst allegation, there is some perversion to it that causes the people to believe in that allegation. So for example, what was our Prophet accused of? What were some of the things he was accused of? Tell me. Number one, what? Magician. He's a magician. Okay. What is the sign of a magician? He comes forth with some type of magic, some type of something strange. Did not our Prophet have some miracles? Right? So there's a kernel of truth, and they have distorted it to the point of being a major lie. What else did they accuse him of? Poet. Poet. And what is poetry? Beautiful speech. And what is the Quran? Ahsan al-hadith and ahsan al-kitab. So there's a kernel of truth, and then it is put with so much lies on it. Right? And the reason I say this is that we as Muslims need to have the perception or the wisdom to see through to what is this kernel, so that we can then clarify. We are accused these days of being a violent religion, and wallahi, from their perspective, put yourself in the shoes of a Fox News viewer, right? From their perspective, all they see is violence coming from our lands. There's a kernel of truth, and then there's all of these lies and misconceptions and paradigm shifts, right? We need to understand this before we open our mouths to defend our religion. Here we have Urwa coming forth with the same type of kalam like this. So the Prophet ﷺ responds back, I am the one fulfilling the ties. These are the ones breaking it. I am the one coming with a better religion, not a worse religion. I'm the one, I want good for my people, and I want them to have a better life, not a worse life. And as I said, this is the same reality to this day. All of the allegations against Islam, whatever they might be, Islam suppresses women. Subhanallah, look at the culture around us and what passes for entertainment and what goes on in modern times. What is the filth that we see? Who is the one exploiting women? Who is the one exploiting women? We protect and honor the women, but just because we protect and honor them, that protection becomes exploitation. Right? So again, there is a kernel of truth from their perspective. We need to understand their perspective before we can defend our religion. So Urwa then responded back and he said, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you were to remove the matter of your people, forget who these people are, forget you and your animosity, have you ever heard of any Arab who destroyed his own tribe before you? Meaning, forget the personal animosity. You and the Quraysh are at such odds, you might actually cause their destruction. And he said, if it is the other, meaning if they are going to fight you, because either you're going to fight them and win, or they will fight you and win, right? So he is saying, he's trying to reason with him from the Jahili perspective. Have you ever heard of an Arab who fought his own tribe and then got rid of them? You will eliminate your whole tribe of the Quraysh if you win? Is that what you want? And if it is the other, meaning if they fight against you, and they are going to be the ones winning, then he said, by Allah, I don't see around me men that I recognize. These are not people that I recognize. Rather, they seem to be a medley, a mixture, a hodgepodge of different bandits who will run away from you and leave you at the earliest chance possible. What's he saying? What's he saying? Not just Quraysh is more noble. Hypocrites, do you think Urwa understands who's a munafiq and who's a Muslim? Nothing to do with hypocrites. Why would they not be loyal? Different tribes. Not just less of Arabs. Different tribes. Why? What's the big deal if they're different tribes? From Urwa's perspective, put yourself in his shoes. From Urwa's perspective, why are these medley mixture of different Arabs behind you? Because the way he has viewed the world, Quraysh on one side, Hawazin on one side, Kinana on one side, Thaqif on one side. This is the gang mentality. I don't care if my tribe is right or wrong, I am with my tribe. Right? This is his perspective. And I will defend my tribe no matter what the cost, no matter who does what, I will fight with my tribe. So now for the first time in his life, he is seeing a group of people, nothing unites them from his perspective. From his perspective, nothing unites them. He doesn't understand the unity of Islam. It's complete blind. Obviously he doesn't have Iman. He is going to embrace many years later, not now. Right now he has zero, nothing. And he doesn't even understand. He's looking around and he says, I see around me a group, a medley, a mixture of people. If they are attacked by the Quraysh, every one of them will flee you instantaneously. Why? Because they're not loyal to you. Why will the Aus guard your back? Why will the Khazraj be on your right hand side? Why will this and that ever be behind you? And remember, the Muhajirun, the actual Qurashi of the Sahaba were very few in number, less than 100. So the bulk of the 1400 were non-Qurashi, right? So he says, I don't recognize any of these men. They're not even men. Now, when Urwa said this, he heard a vile curse. He heard a vile curse. And the curse is so vile, I cannot even translate it in the masjid. And even if we're not the masjid, I would not translate this amongst the audience. But it is a curse that is extremely vulgar and very crude. And it is coming from the last Sahabi that you would ever expect to hear a curse word from. And that is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. When Urwa said, I don't see any men around you. Who are these people? The minute that battle is seen, they will all flee and abandon you. He heard a loud shout. And he heard a voice say, in Arabic, since most of you don't understand Arabic, umsus budra lat, for the Arabs here. You want to hear it again? It's in all the books of the Seerah. Umsus budra lat. Right? It's a very vulgar phrase. Very vulgar phrase. And he says, who is that? And Abu Bakr says, Ibn Abi Qahafa. Not even Abu Bakr. This is the son of Abu Qahafa. Right? And so Urwa says that, Wallahi, had it not been for a favor that you did to me and I haven't paid you back, I would have responded with a similar remark. So there's a pause here. I mean, the vulgar thing has to do with the private organ of a female, and Lat is the god that the Arabs worship, and umsus means to go suck on, and that's the private organ, and then Lat. And so Abu Bakr utters a very vile curse to Lat, which is very derogatory and very demeaning. And why does he mention Lat? Because Lat was the god of Thaqif, which is where Urwa is from. Lat was in Thaqif, and Thaqif was known for protecting Lat. And Lat was the most famous idol of the vicinity. أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ اللَّاتَ وَالْعُزَّى وَمَنَاةَ الثَّالِثَةَ الْأُخْرَى. This is Surah Al-Najm. Right? So Urwa is the guardian, he's the chieftain, he's the guardian of Lat. And so Abu Bakr says, and then he says, go and suck on that. And then he says, do you really think we will abandon him? Do you think we will abandon him? That's what you think? So now what we find here is something amazing. We find Abu Bakr's anger goes from 0 to 100 in 0.1 second. 0 to 100, 0.1 second. Instantaneously. Why? Because this man has accused the Muslims of abandoning the Prophet ﷺ. And he becomes so angry that the most gentle, the most kind, the most shy, the most, he loses his anger, he loses his temper, if you like, and he curses a vile curse, using words that are definitely impolite words, very crude words. And this shows us the ghira of Abu Bakr, the iman of Abu Bakr, that he wasn't angry because he was insulted. He was angry that the Prophet ﷺ is being insulted, that his people around him will abandon. And he felt such anger that he uttered a phrase that otherwise, other than this situation, would be something that is inappropriate. But this shows us that there are some very rare exceptions that sometimes being vulgar does get the point across. This is the exception and not the rule. That sometimes in such a context, and the Prophet ﷺ did not rebuke Abu Bakr, he did not, it shows that, look, it's understood his anger got the better of him, and he uttered a phrase that otherwise would not be appropriate. And this shows us that, again, once in a blue moon, like in the incidents of Hudeybiye type of stuff, that sometimes being vulgar is something that there is a benefit to, but the general rule is obviously we completely avoid such talk. But sometimes there is nothing that gets the message across like Abu Bakr's insult to Lat, right? Because this is an insult to Lat, and generally speaking the Quran says don't insult their idols, okay? And it's a very derogatory thing, and it's a very vulgar thing, showing them, who do you think you are with your false god that you even consider a female and you view females in this manner? Right, that females are not the same as males and should be killed and whatnot. That's how the Jahili Arabs were, right? So who do you think you are to come and preach to us that we're going to abandon our Prophet? And why did Urwa say, if you didn't have a favor over you, I would respond? So we learn from the previous books that Urwa had a debt that he wasn't able to pay off, so Abu Bakr gave him the money to pay that debt off. Abu Bakr gave him the money to pay that debt off in the days before this. And so Urwa says, you still have a favor that I haven't repaid. And had it not been for that favor, I could have responded in kind. But because of that favor, I have to repay that favor. Basically, the repayment of the favor is I will not insult you. Right? Now, this shows us, subhanAllah, that being nice and good always has its advantages. Right? Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala an was such a nice person. He is giving loans to Urwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. Right? How does he know that a time will come when that loan will be repaid in such a manner? And so Urwa basically tries to basically ridicule the Muslims. And actually his intention was not to ridicule. He was dead serious. He really felt, who are these people that are going to fight you? He thought he's being sympathetic. Like, Muhammad, come to your senses, look around you. You think these people are going to fight you? And he doesn't realize what is Islam. He doesn't realize what is Iman. He doesn't realize the anger that Muslims feel when the Prophet ﷺ is insulted. This is an anger we all know. We all see it in the modern world. And Urwa continued trying to convince the Prophet ﷺ to give up the plan, to go back. And it was the custom of the people of those times that when two leaders met, they would hold on to their beards of the other as a gesture of brotherliness, of this is, you know, we're equal, we're peers, right? So they will hold on to the beard to make a point. This was the custom of the people of that time. And he did this a few times. And every time he did it, out of the blue, the scabbard of a sword would appear, the handle of the sword, I should say, not the handle of the sword, and it would hit him. And the hitting got harder and harder until finally, when he did it one more time, the scabbard came, or the handle, like the back of the sword, right, came and hit it so hard and said, and he heard a voice that said, get your hand away from the beard of the Prophet ﷺ before the hand will be cut off from its owner. Meaning next time you do that, you're not going to have a hand. So finally he said, who is this voice? Because there was a man in armor, in the turban around him. Who is this voice? And it turns out it is his own nephew, Mughira ibn Shu'bah al-Thaqafi. Mughira ibn Shu'bah, the famous. And Mughira is the nephew, literally the father's, the brother's son, literally, the nephew. So Mughira ibn Shu'bah is the nephew of Urwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. Mughira ibn Shu'bah, the famous Sahabi, we all know Mughira ibn Shu'bah, right? Now Mughira ibn Shu'bah, he has a story, by the way. Mughira ibn Shu'bah, in his early days, in his young days, he was a playboy, he was a bandit, he was a bad person, drinking, womanizing, and he got involved with the wrong company. This is before Islam. And he became a part of a bunch of thugs, a bunch of the mafia, let's say, right? And he began participating in robbery until finally he participated in highway robbery. Meaning, you know, there's a caravan going by, innocent caravan, nothing to do with anything, and him and his comrades, they go and they attack this caravan, they kill, and they get all the money, and they take the money. And so he was a part of this group, and one time he went and did this type of highway robbery, and the tribe that he did it against, they declared war against the Thaqif, basically, because Mughira and his comrades were from the Thaqif. So the Thaqif had to bend over backwards, pay a lot of blood money, calm the situation down. When these guys saw this, they all fled. This gang, they all broke up and fled. They can't go back to Thaqif. And Mughira eventually, after here and there and here and there, he eventually hears of Islam and he decides to convert, and he then comes to Medina. Okay, so now he's turned over a new leaf. He's no longer the highway bandit. So the Prophet ﷺ told him, this is back in the few years ago, the Prophet ﷺ told him that as for your Islam, we will accept it. But as for your money and all of your booty that you stole, we cannot accept any of that. You can't bring this here. And this shows us the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ, that you have baggage, literally baggage in this case. You have goods, you have money that is haram for you to have taken. You kill people. We can't accept that. Your Islam, okay, your Islam, it cancels all of your sins. If you're truly a Muslim, then alhamdulillah, join us. But we cannot benefit from your wealth and your money. And this shows us The fairness of Islam. Look, subhanAllah, the fairness of Islam. That Mughira had gotten this money, and this money is not a Muslim money, it's a money of a pagan. But it's still haram money, because in Islam, the lives of non-Muslims are also sacred unless there's a legitimate reason, right? In Islam, you cannot just go and commit. And by the way, this is a very, very important refutation of those who accuse the Prophet and the early Muslims of being highway robbers. And we talked about this in the Meccan stage many, many lectures ago, that one of the main criticisms that Orientalists or non-Muslim researchers say, oh, the early Muslims were a bunch of highway robbers. And they say this because once again, who would they attack? The Quraysh. And it is 100% true that they used to attack the caravans of the Quraysh. 100% true. But they never attacked the caravans of neutral tribes. And again, there is this kernel of truth which is then layered here and there. Okay? So this incident of Mughira, not directly to Hudaybiya, would go back, shows us what? That the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba were not only not highway robbers, they did not accept any money that came from what is called highway robbery. And they refused Mughira to bring in this money. And so Mughira had to accept Islam and start from scratch, and that's exactly what happened. And now he becomes a good Muslim. Mughira is a famous companion. There's so many hadith from him, and now he is like a bodyguard. He's like a personal bodyguard of the Prophet. He's standing there, right next to him. And when his own uncle puts his hand, so you can imagine he feels an extra anger because this is his uncle. So he, out of all of the Sahaba, he feels enough guts to put his sword, say, get your hand away. Because the rest of them, he is the chieftain of Thaqif, right? But Mughira is also from Thaqif. And Mughira, he doesn't feel that type of problems as the others do in getting physical with his uncle. So he says, next time you do this, you won't have a hand to come forth to the beard of the Prophet. So Urwa says, who said that? And Mughira says, it is Mughira ibn Shu'bah. Meaning, this is your nephew Mughira. And so Urwa responds back to him. And he can respond back to him. He was silent at Abu Bakr, but now this is his nephew. And he says, O traitor, are you still not basking in your traitor, in your deceit? In other words, you have ruined our reputation, and you're still living the life of a traitor, if you like. And so he basically made fun, not made fun of, but he ridiculed, or he basically cursed Mughira because of this. And this shows us that, again, the Prophet ﷺ's fairness when he accepted Mughira's Islam but not his money. But nonetheless, Mughira could not respond because he did have that problem. That's a valid point his uncle said, that we had to deal with your treason. We had to sacrifice so much money. We had to do so many things to avoid civil war and bloodshed. And now you're the traitor and you're doing this to me. And he could not respond to that charge, to that barb, if you like, because there was a point of truth to that. And Urwa began looking around and continued to make negotiations with the Prophet ﷺ, but obviously the Prophet ﷺ is not going to return to Medina, so the negotiations broke down. And he probably stayed in the camp an hour or two trying to convince the Prophet ﷺ to go back. He then returns to the Quraysh. And remember, Urwa is the chieftain or one of the major leaders of the Thaqif. He then returns to the Quraysh, and his description of the Sahaba, his description of the Sahaba is one of the most amazing descriptions in the whole seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because he describes the Sahaba as an outsider. The Sahaba did not describe themselves the way he described them. Because at the time he's an outsider. Later on he's going to become a Muslim. But at this point in time, he has never seen Islam or the Sahaba. This is the first exposure to Islam and the Sahaba. And so we hear descriptions that no other Sahabi says because he is an outsider. What does Urwa say? Urwa goes back to the Quraysh and he says, Ya qawm, O people, I have visited the kings and entered the palace of Caesar of Rome, and Kisra of Persia, and Najashi of Abyssinia. Now, because he's the chieftain of the Banu Thaqif, he has had the luxury that very few Arabs have had. That he has literally had the honor of going to the Caesar's palace, the Sassanid emperor's palace, and Najashi's palace. He is Urwa, he is the chieftain of Thaqif, he is from the tribe of the city of Ta'if. So he has that honor that he can say, I have been to all of these leaders. Guess what he says? Wallahi, I have never seen any king being shown respect the way that Ashabu Muhammad show respect to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Neither Rome, nor Persia, nor Najashi. No one has that amount of izzah that the ashab of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have for Muhammad. Wallahi, ma nakhama nukhama, he didn't even spit, except that one of the Sahaba caught that spit before it touched the ground and rubbed it on his face and body for barakah, right? That the Prophet, and never did he wash himself with wudu, except that كادوا يقتتلون على وضوئه. It is as if they were fighting one another to catch those drops of water coming from him. Now subhanallah, none of the Sahaba told us this. Why? Because they took it for granted. It's nothing weird to them. And there's also an element of modesty. Like, we're not going to tell you this, right? But here we have Urwa ibn Mas'ud as an outsider. He's never seen such a bizarre scene in his life, right? Who amongst the kings can say when they spit, somebody jumps and catches that spit? Wallah, you think about it. This is not, you don't do this for any normal human being, right? Who amongst the kings, when he washes his face, the water does not reach the ground because there are Sahaba that are just going to catch the water and then put it on themselves. And Urwa goes on, that if he wanted to command them something, he only needed to raise his face and look, and they would race to see who would be the first to do that command. Without even opening his mouth, the Sahaba are there to do his every beck and calling. And he says that when he spoke, they all lowered their heads and their voices in front of him, and none of them would look at him directly out of haiba and respect. There is no king in the world except that his minister, his vizier, people look at him and talk to him. Even if they address him with respect, but the whole audience is looking at the ground, nobody. You speak to them directly. And the Prophet did not command them to do this, obviously, but it is natural. It just comes. In Arabic it's called haiba, and haiba in English it means the immense respect. That there's so much respect, they're not even looking up directly at his eyes. And this reminds all of us, it should remind us of that famous hadith of Amr ibn al-As radiallahu ta'ala an. Amr ibn al-As, who was one of the last Sahaba to accept Islam before the conquest of Mecca. He was one of the last Sahaba. And what did Amr ibn al-As say? That wallahi, there was nothing more beloved to me than to stare at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But if you ask me to describe him to you, I couldn't do that, because I could never raise my head and look directly at him out of haiba, out of respect for him. That he's battling himself to look at the Prophet ﷺ, right? Because on the one hand, he loves to look at him. It's beauty emanating. As the hadith of Jabir that looked at the full moon and looked at the Prophet ﷺ, and wallahi, the Prophet ﷺ is more beautiful than the full moon, right? And then on the other hand, he cannot look at him. Why? Because there is this awe that comes, reverence that comes, that you cannot even look up directly into his eyes. So he's battling with himself. I want to look, but I cannot look. And this is what this exact narration reminds us of. That he himself, Urwa, as a non-Muslim, is saying that they would never look at him directly in the face, ijlalan wa haybatan, out of jalal, out of respect for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, what I find absolutely amazing, I don't know if any of you caught this bit. What happens to Urwa in 1 hour? What was he saying at the beginning of this hour? What did he say at the beginning? Who are these people? Right? They're going to abandon you at the first sign of a sword. Then in 1 hour, what happens? Look, wallahi, I've never seen anybody like them. Neither Najashi, nor this, nor that. They can't even look. They can't. Do you see this, right? From where to where? And words fail, all of us, to talk about that change in Urwa. 1 hour to see the Sahaba and how they interacted with the Prophet ﷺ converts Urwa into a believer of the Sahaba. Think about that, right? From coming from his jahili mind, and he doesn't see beyond Islam, and he's like, who are these people? How would they fight you? Then he goes back And he says to the Quraysh, I have never seen a group that respect and love their leader more than the Sahaba love the Prophet ﷺ. And then he goes on and he says, and I have measured them for you, I have absorbed them for you, so know that if you wish the sword, they will give you what you wish. Now, subhanAllah, look again the change. He's telling the Prophet ﷺ that you better be careful because these people are never going to fight for you. Right? Now when he goes back to the Quraysh, without the Prophet ﷺ opening his mouth to defend the Sahaba, to see someone as soft as Abu Bakr utter a vile curse, to see his own nephew take the sword or take the sword and literally poke him so many times and then say, I will cut your hand off if you dare touch the beard of the Prophet ﷺ. To see the Sahaba in this manner, he comes back a convert, not yet to Islam, that's going to come. He's going to convert to Islam, but he comes back a convert in the iman of the Sahaba, not in iman yet. But even a kafir cannot deny the iman of the Sahaba. So he says, I have seen a group, and I'm quoting from him, I have seen a group, they don't care what happens to them if their companion is harmed. Meaning the Prophet ﷺ. They don't care about themselves. They will do everything to protect him. Even the women amongst them would never hand him over no matter what the cost. Forget the men, even the women. Subhanallah, where to where? Wallahi, to me this is one of the most beautiful paragraphs of the seerah that I love to read, because it demonstrates something that in so poetic terms and in so beautiful terms that we don't hear from the Sahaba themselves. So then he says, take my advice. I fear that you will not be able to win over him. He has too strong of an army, even though quantity-wise the Quraysh are triple. The Quraysh are at home, they're triple, and the Muslims are only 1,400. But still he says, I fear you won't be able to beat them. And besides, now he gets soft and he says, he is a man that has come to this house wishing to honor it and with sacrificial animals, but instead he is being deprived and denied and prevented. Immediate shift of sides here, right? He leaves Mecca telling the Quraysh, I'm on your side. I have your back. I've always been on your side, right? 1 hour meeting with the Prophet and the Muslims, and now his heart is with which side, right? And wallahi, these are things you cannot control. This comes from iman, raw iman. This comes when a group believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People see that belief, even if they don't have it, they can sense it. And this is a big lesson for us, brothers and sisters. Our main weapon is not arms, it's not weaponry of the hands. Our main weapon is our belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we have that, the rest will fall into place. And this clearly shows that the Prophet did not intellectually respond to everything. All that needed to be shown was Islam and the Muslims cooperating together, showing their respect to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At this, the Quraysh got angry. The Quraysh got angry, and they said, if only someone else besides you had said this. If only someone else besides you had said this. Ya Aba Ya'fur. Ya Aba Ya'fur was his kunya. Aba Ya'fur was his kunya. Ya Aba Ya'fur, if only someone else besides you had said this. Meaning, come on, we thought better of you. You as well, now you're switching sides emotionally, right? If only somebody else has said this, but we will not allow him this year. This year there is no question. So once again the Quraysh are sticking to their guns, and they do stick to their guns to the end. Their arrogance and their fanaticism, their stubbornness has got the better. Khalas, we have made up our minds. Doesn't matter who says otherwise. The Arabs are not going to say that he entered Mecca despite us. We will have the upper hand. And here we find over here so many benefits. I already mentioned many of them here, that Urwa's opinion changing. But one thing I have to point out here, that wallahi, brothers and sisters, a spade is a spade and the truth is the truth. Here, a kafir at the time, he's going to accept this. Right now he's a kafir, pagan, idol worshipper. He recognizes the maqam of the Sahaba. What do we say to those who claim to be Muslim and they don't recognize the maqam of the Sahaba? I mean, wallahi, it's mind-boggling that a pagan cannot help but be so impressed, awed, saying, I've never seen a human sight like this in my life. And it is wallahi shameful and sad that there are people who do not respect the Sahaba and they claim to be worshipping Allah and following the Messenger. And here we have a pagan testifying to the maqam of the Sahaba. Also we see over here that the Prophet ﷺ clearly is waging a type of psychological battle. And clearly he's winning. Anybody that comes to meet him, he comes back convinced. Right? And therefore, the battle is not just verbal, it's not just physical, there's also a psychological side. And one of the best ways to win the psychological battle is simply to stick to your principles. Be firm in what you believe. And eventually, people will respect you for that firmness. Wallahi, even those who don't believe, when you are firm to your beliefs, they have to admire your principle stance. You know what? I might disagree, but he's a man who follows his beliefs. And we, unfortunately, are too embarrassed many times to stand up to our beliefs. And we also witness over here the long-term thinking, the strategy, the diplomacy of the Prophet ﷺ. His diplomatic ways of basically dividing the Quraysh up or the Arabs up. So bit by bit, people are simply getting away from the Qurayshi position. And we'll see now we have the Thaqif breaking away. We'll see another person break away with another major group. This is long-term strategy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now just as a side point, as a footnote here, so Urwa was from the tribe of Thaqif, as we said, from Ta'if, and Urwa, he accepted Islam in the 9th year of the Hijrah. After the conquest of Mecca, he officially accepted Islam in the 9th year of the Hijrah, and we're going to talk about his story probably in around 2 months, maybe inshallah ta'ala, if Allah gives us life, and we continue the seerah when we get to the story of Thaqif and whatnot. And he was one of the first of the elders of Thaqif to accept Islam. One of the first of the elders of Thaqif, of the noblemen of Thaqif, to accept Islam. And eventually we'll get to the story of Thaqif. Thaqif was perhaps the most difficult tribe. I mean, after all, they did what they did back in the day. Remember? The incident of Ta'if, that's Thaqif, right? The same incident of Ta'if is Thaqif. They did what they did. And Thaqif was the most stubborn tribe to the end. Even when they accepted Islam, they gave the most bizarre conditions. Ya Rasulullah, it's cold in Ta'if, we don't want to do wudu. Literally, right? Do we have to do ghusl? We don't want to do jihad with you. How about zakat? Can we just get rid of zakat because we don't want to give our money to you? Right? They had so many weird and bizarre. We'll come to that when we come to that. That's the tribe of Thaqif. That even when they reluctantly embraced, they had all of these bizarre conditions. So this is from the tribe of Thaqif, and Urwa eventually accepted Islam. He was the first of the elders of Thaqif to accept Islam, and he traveled to Medina in the 9th year of the Hijrah to embrace Islam at the hands of the Prophet ﷺ, to announce his Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ told him that inni akhsha alayk, I'm scared for you. That your people, I know your people basically, I'm scared when you go back, what's going to happen to you? And Urwa was very confident, too confident. And he said, Ya Rasulullah, my tribe, listen to what he said, if I'm sleeping, they would never wake me up. Meaning I have that maqam amongst them, that if one of them saw me sleeping, nobody would wake me up. Even that's how much they respect me. Well, they respected you before your Islam. Now you will see what Islam does, right? So he felt so confident, he said, don't worry, I can take care of myself, my people respect me. The Prophet ﷺ knows what happens when you start giving da'wah to Islam. The Prophet ﷺ was more respected amongst the Quraysh than Urwa was amongst the Thaqif, right? But he insisted, I want to go back, I want to go back. So the Prophet ﷺ let him go back. Okay, you want to go back, go back. And he returns to his people and he begins preaching Islam to them, and he hears from them the shatam and the sab and the vulgarity and the cursing that he could never imagine his own people do to him. And so he goes back to his house saddened and distressed and spends the night there. The first night he comes back, and the next morning it's Fajr time, so he goes on the roof, he gives the adhan and he starts praying. And when somebody sees him pray, takes a bow and arrow and shoots him right then and there on the top of his roof. And it is said, Ta'if is at a mountainous region, and it is literally on top of the mountain, and it is said that the arrow not only hit him, but he fell basically into the ravine or into the valleys underneath, and he died a shaheed. And when the news reached the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, مثل عروة كمثل صاحب ياسين. مثل عروة كمثل صاحب ياسين. Urwa is like the one of Yasin, meaning Surah Yasin. What is this? You all understand? Or the one وجاء من أقصى مدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا مهتدون. Right? And then they killed him. And he says that قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. So the Prophet said مثل عروة كمثل صاحب ياسين, that he called his people to Allah, and in response they killed him. He called his people to Allah, and in response they killed him. And anyways, I went into the tangent of Urwa. This is Urwa. At this stage, obviously he's not a Muslim. Clearly, we can say, clearly, it was at this stage that Islam first entered his heart. When? When he saw the respect the Sahaba had for the Prophet ﷺ. And he realized this is not human. Well, I'm sure they say it's not human, but it's not natural. Something divine is coming here, right? That Allah has given some respect. There's revealed something like this that otherwise the kings do not automatically get that, right? And wallahi, this is so true, that every politician, even if he is in power, the people only respect him for his chair, for his kursi. You know, they don't respect him for him. They respect him for what he can offer them, right? Whereas our Prophet ﷺ, we respect and love him for who he is, and not for his what he can offer us monetarily. And this is the difference between respect that we give to the prophets and respect that the people of Kisra and Caesar give to their people. In any case, back to the story of Hudeybiye. So Urwa goes back, he is rebuffed, and so Thaqif cuts off now. So Thaqif is not going to participate. Bit by bit, the conglomeration of the Quraysh is being cut off. And we're going to see another one in a while. Here the Prophet ﷺ felt the need to send somebody now from his side. And so he decided to go with somebody who is not from the Quraysh and not from the Ansar either, somebody who's one of the other tribes, and he chose a Sahabi by the name of Khirash ibn Umayyah from the tribe of Khuza'a. He wasn't from the Aus or the Khazraj, he was not from the Quraysh or the Muhajirun, he was from the tribe of Khuza'a. Why did he choose him? I tried my best to look up what is the reason why. The only reason I could come across myself, it wasn't something that is mentioned, is that perhaps because he is neither Ansari nor Muhajir, that he can be viewed as someone relatively neutral for the time being. Even though he's a Muslim, even though he's in the camp of the Muslims, but hopefully he won't rile up the anger of the Quraysh by sending somebody who is a Qurashi like Abu Bakr or Umar. That's the second step. The next step is to send a Qurashi. Right now he hasn't gotten to that step. He sends somebody who's somewhat tribal-wise neutral. The tribe of Khuza'a is a neutral tribe. Allahu A'lam, this is the only reason I could find. To find somebody from a tribe that has not been involved with the Quraysh directly. The Aus, the Khazraj, there's spilled blood now. Badr has happened, Uhud has happened, Khandaq has happened. So the Quraysh will have something in their hearts, right? As for their fellow Qurayshis, like Abu Bakr and Umar, clearly they will have some things against them. So perhaps the only wisdom that I could come across, he chooses somebody that has a neutral tribe, and that's the tribe of Khuza'a. So he sends Khirash ibn Umayyah, and in order to demonstrate that he really wanted peace, that there's no evil that he has, he sent Khirash on one of his own camels by the name of Al-Tha'lab. And in those days, people recognized other people's horses and camels, not like us that we have no clue. You could show me 100 horses, they all look the same to me. But in those days, people are different. They recognize whose camel and whose horse this is. And so he chose a camel that they would recognize, that this is the camel of the Prophet. So it's a meaning, I want peace here. I'm sending my personal envoy on my camel to you. And when Khirash entered with the camel of the Prophet ﷺ, they clearly recognized that is his camel, and their anger flared up, They surrounded him. A mob gathered, shouting, jostling, shoving, threatening. Eventually, the camel is wounded and hamstrung. So they cut off basically the what is it called, the sinew, the backbone, not the backbone, the leg, the ligament, the ligament of the knee. They cut it off so that the camel is hamstrung, and they're about to kill Khirash. The mob is gathering. You know, mob mentality. You know, there's just people coming and their anger is coming, until finally another person of Khuza'ah calms them down, who is in Mecca at the time, calms them down, says, this is a Khuza'i, you don't want to get involved with this, don't bring them down, you know, and they get there to their senses and they send him back without even a major discussion taking place. So the Prophet realizes that a neutral guy is not going to work. A neutral person is not going to work. Now it's the Qurayshis' turn. Who do they send? It appears as somebody else volunteered, just like Urwa from Thaqif volunteered. So now we have another person volunteering, and this person, his name is Al-Hulays ibn Alqama from the tribe of Kinana, Al-Kinani, from the tribe of Kinana. And Kinana was the largest tribe in the surrounding areas outside of Mecca, and these tribes, they were generally called Al-Ahabish. We've talked about Al-Ahabish in the Battle of Ahzab, when the bulk of the army were from the Ahabish, not Habashi, Ahabish. And Ahabish, they are basically the name given to the tribes around Mecca. And the biggest of them is Kinana. So, Al-Hulays ibn Alqama from the tribe of Kinana, he volunteers. Because again, other tribes are getting involved now. This is a major issue. Why is this a major issue? Not only is the past tension, but there is a theological issue involved, that the Quraysh are preventing a group coming to Mecca. And this is a very big deal, because the Quraysh are not allowed to prevent people coming to Mecca. And this is going to cause a scandal either way. And so Al-Hulays volunteers, says, let me go and speak to the Muslims. The Quraysh agree, and when Al-Hulays approaches, the Prophet recognizes him from the distance. And by the way, this shows that clearly the Prophet's vision is way beyond 2020. For him to recognize somebody far away before even Hulays enters the camp. And he says, this is Al-Hulays ibn Alqama from Kinana. So he mentions to the Sahaba who this man is. From the distance, he's there. This is Al-Hulays ibn Alqama from the Kinana. And his people, they show respect. يُعَظِّمُونَ. They consider sacred the sacrificial animals. One of the things known about this tribe is that they valued the animals that we decorate. You know, we talked about the decoration of the camels and the sheep when you send them to the Kaaba. They consider this to be very sacred. So, show him our sacrificial animals. So, Hulays is still in the distance, he's walking, and the Sahaba take out hundreds and hundreds. Remember, 70 only the Prophet had. How many would be total? There must be at least 500. And these are just the camels. On top of this, you have the sheep and the goats and others. And all of them are decorated with their markings and their special ribbons and strings. This is, as I explained to you, this is what they would do. And this is still done to this day. That you decorate the animals to demonstrate, this is a camel, this is an animal, we have dedicated it to the house of Allah and the poor people in the house of Allah. So, Hulays is coming. And before he even gets to the camp, the Sahaba bring out hundreds of camels, and they bring the camels to the valley that he is coming down into, and he sees the entire valley full of camels that have been decorated for the fuqara of Mecca. And he sees the Muslims in ihram doing the talbiyah, labbaik Allahumma labbaik. They're basically showing, you know, their status. And Al-Hulays doesn't even enter the camp of the Muslims. He turns around, he goes back to the Quraysh, and he says, Subhanallah, it is not allowed to prevent these animals from reaching their destination, and from preventing the pilgrims from visiting the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Without even speaking to the Prophet ﷺ, he is converted over. Again, we see here the diplomacy of the Prophet ﷺ. We see here the long-term vision of the Prophet. We see here psychological warfare, basically, right? He sees Hulays, he recognizes him, and he says, I know exactly what his soft spot is. And that soft spot is an Islamic soft spot, which is what? venerating the house of Allah, being in ihram, saying the talbiyah. These camels are going to be given to the poor people. Show him why we're here. We're here for peace and not for war. We're here to do tawaf around the Kaaba. We're here to be pilgrims and not to shed any blood. So when Hulays sees all of this, and there was one point as well, that because the Muslims had such a difficult journey and they hadn't been through the main road, not only were they hungry, their camels were hungry. And you could see the hunger of the camels. And this is very dangerous, because these camels, if they don't get to the Kaaba in time, poor people will not be able to eat of them. Right? Sacrificial meat is all gone to waste, and you could see the camels thinning up. You could see the camels, hungry and weak. And so Hulays feels a sense of great anger against the Quraysh. How could you prevent the Muslims from coming to the Kaaba and they have what they have? When they heard him switch sides, now this is like the third, fourth person switching sides emotionally, they insulted him and they said, who are you? You're just an ignorant Bedouin. Because again, this is not the Qurashi, this is not Thaqif, these are the outlying tribes from Kinana. You're just an ignorant Bedouin. Our mistake was to send you. We shouldn't have sent you. Right? And we see over here, now subhanAllah, as soon as they said this, Al-Hulays swore by Allah that none of the Ahabish would support the Quraysh. Khalas, half the tribe now, half the army now, it goes away. We already have the Thaqif walk away, now we have the Ahabish walk away. Look at what's happening here. The truth will always win in the end. The truth will always win. And in this case, the Muslims had 110% of the truth. They just want to do tawaf. They want to do umrah. And the Quraysh are 100% zalim. Clear, black and white. And so we have honest people who are idol worshippers. They're pagans, right? But the truth is higher than their theology here. They realize what the Quraysh is doing is wrong. And to add insult to injury, so they send Hulays, and then when Hulays comes back with his opinion, what did they say? You're just a fool, you're a Bedouin, we shouldn't have sent you. What is that going to do to Hulays? And by the way, Hulays, it is mentioned in the books that he was considered to be a wise man. He was considered to be a person of intelligence. And this will add more insult, that they go back to ethnicity. You're just a Bedouin. Basically, this is racism. And it's 100% racism, right? Who are you? You're just a Bedouin. You're not Qurashi. We shouldn't have sent you in the first place. So what happens? He swears by Allah, none of his people will be on your side. Khalas, we're out of here. You're left to your own. So bit by bit, what's happening? The large sympathy that the Quraysh had is now being cut away, and eventually it's only going to be the Quraysh left, and they're going to have to be forced to negotiate. Also, we see over here that every community, it has its righteous people. Every community, it has its righteous people. And this is a point that unfortunately some minority of Muslims, in their overzealousness, and alhamdulillah, I'm sure none of you here, but there are people that are so narrow-minded that they think that if you're not a Muslim, you can't have any good in you. And wallahi, this is so ridiculous. If you're not a Muslim, no doubt your theology is wrong. But does this mean you cannot be honest? You cannot be truthful? You cannot stand up for justice? No. In the whole seerah, we have so many examples that we have idol worshippers standing up for what is true. And the Prophet ﷺ is welcoming this, taking advantage of it. And wallahi, we see in our times as well, in this land of ours, there are a small minority of right-wing Islamophobes. They want to smear the whole religion, they want to say this and that, and they want to ban the Sharia, and they want to kick Muslims out, and they want to, recently there was just this week, in Europe somewhere, one of the universities banned hijab or something. Another university banned the niqab, right? Ironic, because they're saying they're championing women's rights and freedoms, and yet they ban the hijab and the niqab, and this is causing a huge controversy. So a lot of non-Muslims are standing up and saying, how can you ban a woman's dress if she wants to dress like this, right? This is against our values. How can you ban a woman who wants to wear a veil, who wants to wear a headscarf? Because they're saying it's a security risk. To wear a headscarf becomes now a security risk, right? To wear a niqab becomes a security risk. Nonetheless, we have here what happened recently, the anti-Sharia bills all across America. 23 states, anti-Sharia bills. We had the ACLU. We had so many Americans that are not Muslim. They say, come on, get over it. They're a group of religious people. They have the right to practice their faith like every religion has the right to practice its faith. Every society has its good people and its bad people. Every society. Don't we have our good and our bad as well? right? Every society has. And the Muslim takes advantage of the good wherever it comes from. So here the Prophet ﷺ is finding Hulays, he finds it and he recognizes this is the way that I will show him we are upon the truth. There's also an interesting point here, and that is that it is a part of prophetic wisdom to use those psychological factors that are appealing to every group. So Hulays, for example, from the tribe of Kinana, he has a soft spot for sacrificial camels. Do Muslims also have sacrificial camels giving to the poor of Mecca? Yes. If we use that, is there anything wrong? No. So we have another issue here, which again we have some overzealous Muslims as well. And let me give you some examples of modern times. This happened to me, for example. I gave a talk about how Islam tells us to be green. You understand what be green means? Environmentally conservative and take care of the water and energy and whatnot, right? So somebody comments that, so just because it's fashionable for the non-Muslims to talk about it, so now you also have to follow in their footsteps. It becomes un-Islamic to mention something that is Islamic just because non-Muslims talk about it. Wallahi, this is so narrow-minded, you just want to scream with frustration. Does our religion tell us to conserve water? I can give you 10 evidences, yes it does. Does our religion tell us to use resources naturally and carefully? Yes it does. Does our religion tell us to treat animals nicely, animal rights, right? I gave a lecture about animal rights here in MIC and other places as well. And comments come back from YouTube viewers and whatnot like that, oh, just because they talk about animal rights, so now you have to talk about animal rights. Subhanallah. Wallahi, this type of fanaticism, it's very frustrating, honestly, for us to have to deal with. Wallahi, we have green Islam, we have animal rights in Islam, no doubt. Now I'll be the first to say this. We don't change what Islam says because it's popular or unpopular. No doubt. So, and I gave the talk about animal rights and I mentioned this. If some people say that it is unethical to kill animals for food, you have to go vegetarian. We say thanks but no thanks. It is sunnah to eat meat, and alhamdulillah sunnah to eat meat. Okay? So we draw the line where, look, if people go to extremes, we say no. Our religion, Brother Adus, anytime there's a meat joke, we have the barbecue expert over here, alhamdulillah. So the point is that no doubt, we don't change the Sharia because it's popular or unpopular, but if there's a trend going on in society, is there anything wrong with talking about that trend in Islam? This is a part of our da'wah. You understand what I'm saying here, right? We get this directly from what's happening now with Hulays ibn Alqamah. That the Prophet ﷺ demonstrated something that is clearly Islamic, but Alqamah has a special soft spot for this issue. So guess what? We'll just show that issue to him and it will help us. We're not bending the truth. This is the reality. This is the truth. And it will get his heart into our sympathy for our religion. And that's exactly what happened. Now, let me just try to finish this up, inshallah. So now Hulays goes back without even meeting with the Prophet, and because he is convinced that these people are right and the Quraysh is wrong, the Quraysh are rude to him, so Hulays cuts off. Khalas, you're on your own now. So now it is back to the Prophet's turn. And the Prophet decides to send a Qurashi. Khalas, you clearly don't want somebody neutral, let's send a Qurashi. Who should we send? The Prophet chooses Umar ibn al-Khattab. Why choose Umar? Perhaps because of his strength and bravery. Because you are walking into enemy territory. Again, we don't know why. We have to make an assumption. Why Umar? The only thing that comes to mind, because in terms of many other factors, there are other people. Abu Bakr is there, Uthman is there, Ali is there. Why Umar? Can all of the Sahaba were there? Well, perhaps because Umar was physically the strongest of them and the most bravest of them. And this is the first time that an official emissary has come from the Prophet's side back into Mecca. Think about it. 6 years have gone by and no Muslim has set foot in Mecca as a free person, as an emissary. No Muslim. Yes, there have been prisoners of war. Yes, there have been people who have been killed in Mecca. But no Muslim has come back free, walked into the lion's den. That will require courage and bravery. Who better than the very person who announced his Islam when he converted? And then he said, whoever wants his mother to cry for him tonight, let him meet me outside before I exit for Medina. Remember? That's Umar ibn al-Khattab. Okay? So he chooses Umar ibn al-Khattab. And Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu ta'ala an, he says to the Prophet ﷺ that, Ya Rasulullah, my animosity to the Quraysh is well known, and I fear that the Quraysh will not accept me, and that they will kill me. He said this, I fear that, I think that they will kill me, and I don't have anyone from my tribe of Adi ibn Ka'b to protect me. We don't know, perhaps his tribe had been killed or whatnot. He doesn't have the Bani Adi anymore. So if you want me to go, I will go. But Uthman ibn Affan has more nobility in their eyes than I do. Now remember, in the eyes of the Quraysh, what protects you? It's not physical strength, it is your tribe. So he says, if you want me to go, I will go. So when nobody will ever accuse Umar of being a coward, we know who he is, right? And he's saying, if you want me to go, I'll go. But if you want somebody who will actually be able to speak, perhaps Uthman would be the better choice. Now, by the way, out of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, many of you don't realize this, Uthman was the closest in lineage to the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Bakr and Umar were like 6th and 8th cousins, literally. 6th and 8th cousins. Uthman, he's from Banu Abd al-Shams. Banu Abd al-Shams is the great-grandfather. Great-grandfather of Hashim and Abd al-Shams are brothers. Right? So that's just 3 generations, 2, 3 generations back. And of course, who is Banu Abd al-Shams? Who's the main guy, Banu Abd al-Shams? Who can click quickly? No, the main guy that's alive right now in Mecca. Umayyah long died. You all know his name. Abu Jahl is alive now. Abu Jahl is alive now. Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan is Banu Abd al-Shams. And Abu Sufyan is like a second cousin to Uthman. Right? Cousin and a half, cousin once removed. Like that's very close for the Arab, that's very close, right? He's like an am, basically. You know, Abu Sufyan is literally like almost like a direct am, not a direct am, but like a cousin of the father, like that. Abu Sufyan, who is Abu Sufyan? The undisputed leader of Mecca, right? And Uthman is his somewhat nephew. Okay, so Umar's idea is accepted by the Prophet ﷺ. And again, this shows us that the Prophet made ijtihad. Ijtihad is a human ijtihad. And it is possible that somebody can give a better position. If the Prophet sees it, he takes it. And in this case, he saw it. And so the Prophet sent Uthman ibn Affan. And I have the whole story prepared, but unfortunately, I thought I would finish the story to get to the Bay'at al-Ridwan because but anyway, we have plenty of time, alhamdulillah. There's no urgency to finish the seerah any time soon. So I will have to simply pause here and talk about the Bay'at al-Ridwan and why Uthman was delayed and what happened to him in Mecca. We will talk about that inshallah next Wednesday.
وحملته في فلكك المشحون يا من أحال النار حول خليله روحا وريحانا